Commentary on Workbook Lesson 49 in A Course in Miracles. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. The fact that we're doing these lessons and attempting to achieve the learning that the Course sets forth means that there's a part of our mind that's growing sick and tired of being sick and tired, that is growing tired of the voice for fear, and that we want the voice for love to speak to us. One principle to remember is that love is very kind and considerate of us and the powers of our minds, that it doesn't force us to listen to it, and that it respects the power of our minds, and that all that love really requires of us is this invitation to come back in. And once having done that, then our work is really done, because then love will do the rest. So it, this lesson begins. It's quite possible to listen to God's voice all through the day without interrupting your regular activities in any way. So this recognizes this respect for us. Of course, doesn't ask us to change anything right away. We can continue on in our life as it was, doing the things that we do, but we change its purpose. And the purpose now is not to listen to the voice for fear or the voice of the ego, but to listen to the voice for God. So we can do this as we can achieve this and learn this even though we're engaged in our everyday activities. So the part of your mind in which truth abides is in constant communication with God, whether you're aware of it or not. It is the other part of your mind that functions in the world and obeys the world's laws. It is this part that is constantly distracted, disorganized, and highly uncertain. So once we've given this invitation to the voice for love or voice for God, then what we're doing is training our minds to listen, to know the difference between this voice of the ego, this voice of fear, and to distinguish between that voice and the voice for love. And so what we're learning is that this voice for fear or voice for the ego has all these properties. It's constantly distracted, it's disorganized, it's highly uncertain. Whereas, as we move on to the next paragraph, the part that's listening to the voice for God is calm, always at rest, and wholly certain. It's really the only part there is. And the other part is this wild illusion, frantic and distraught, but without reality of any kind. So notice now and here, this is parallel construction, where each of these three sentences start with the same word. And it has parallel construction because it's trying for emphasis. So here's the instructions in doing this practice today. Try today not to listen to it. Try not to listen to this wildly delusional, frantic, distraught, disorganized, fearful voice. Try to identify with the part of your mind where stillness and peace reign forever, and try to hear God's voice calling to you lovingly, reminding you that your Creator has not forgotten His Son. So this is the task that the Holy Spirit has, is to how do you teach someone who has thrown away what is valuable? Well, the only thing that you can do is show them how miserable they are without it, and how happy and joyful they would be with this voice for love that we've thrown away. And that's the key distinguishing feature of God's voice, or the Holy Spirit's voice, is that it always engenders joy, it always engenders peace, and it always engenders love. And the ego can't claim that. Sometimes it's very pleasant the way the ego's activities or the ego's way comes around, and sometimes it's unpleasant. Its moods vary tremendously. And so, what we're learning is that the voice for God, the voice for love, is always the same. It's always joyful, it's always peaceful, it's always certain. And that's how we'll know when we're listening to the voice for love or to the Holy Spirit. Okay, so that's the criteria that we're learning. Um, so, here's the practice instructions. And this is key is to understand we need to practice these lessons. It's because love is kind and considerate. It's not going to force us to anything. It just waits for our invitation. And these practice periods is our invitation to love. It lets love know that we're serious about bringing it back into our awareness. So we'll need at least 4 5-minute practice periods today and more if possible. We will try actually to hear God's voice reminding you of Him and of yourself, and we will approach this happiest and holiest thoughts with confidence, knowing that in doing so we're joining our will with the will of God. He wants you to hear His voice. He gave it to you to be heard. So this reminds us that we're not alone in this. It's really God's strength. It's really God's will that's making it possible for us to return back to love or to hear the voice for love. So that should give us confidence. It's not about us alone. It's There's great power, the only power that there is, that wants us to do this. So we will succeed. We will have confidence. We'll succeed. So here's instructions um, of the sort of posture of your mind as you're trying to do this lesson. So it says, listen in deep silence, be very still and open your mind, go past all the raucous shrieks and sick imaginings that cover your real thoughts and obscure your eternal link with God. Sink deep into the peace that waits for you beyond the frantic, riotous thoughts and sights and sounds of this insane world. Okay, so it's important to remember that we're free to do this, that um, we can see clearly that we're free to behave differently. If you're sitting down, you can decide to stand up. You can decide to pick up a pencil. We can see we have that freedom, and so we need to understand we're free to be able to do this. We can decide in this very moment to stop the mind's activities, this frantic thoughts that are, mind's just racing everywhere. We can say, be still. Let our thoughts be still. Let me listen. We're free to do that at any point, and we need to prove that to ourselves. We need to prove to us that that's the case, and so that's where the practice comes in. We have to quiet the mind. We have to quiet this other voice so we can hear the voice for love. So that's the practice. Listen in deep silence. Be very still and go past all this bubbling on the surface of the mind and listen for this voice for love. So we do not live here. We're trying to reach our real home. We're trying to reach the place where we're truly welcome. We're trying to reach God. So that's where we really live. That's where we'll be comfortable. This place is not our home. This is not where we live. The world in so many ways is threatening to us. We don't know how things will turn out. There's always seems to be danger around the corner. So keeping this in mind motivates us to realize this is not what we want. This is not where we live. It's not our home. Okay, so that's the longer practice periods. And then here comes the frequent practice periods throughout the day. It says, do not forget to repeat today's idea very frequently. So we can do this even though we're engaged in our activities. We can repeat the lesson for the day. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. We need to remind ourselves of this constantly. So we're open to this voice. We need to give this voice this invitation, otherwise we won't be able to hear. So do not forget to repeat today's idea very frequently. Do so with your eyes open when necessary, but closed when possible, and be sure to sit quietly and repeat the idea for today whenever you can, closing your eyes on the world and realizing that you are inviting God's voice to speak to you. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you.